Welcome to the Opperman Report. I am your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. Every Friday night, 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, and also simulcast on CJ Mars Radio and 365 Live. And then we're rebroadcast throughout the week on all kinds of wonderful stations like awakeradio.us and Hazy Radio and Firehorse Radio and all over the place. You can also find us on Spreaker. If you look for the Opperman Report on Spreaker.com, and also to the Opperman Report YouTube channel, you can find all the archives there. Next week, we got a big show coming up. We're going to have Thomas Sheridan, and we're going to be doing a show about Jimmy Savile. He's that guy in the UK that was friendly with all the Queen and all that stuff up there, and is accused of all these incredible sex crimes over there in England. And Mr. Sheridan has some theories that he's possibly even a serial killer, and some very interesting stuff. So I can't wait for that. Hey, real quick, I just want to give a shout out to Daniel T. Jonas. He's one of my Facebook friends, and he's a great guy. He's a big supporter of the show, and he had a stroke. He had 2 strokes, as a matter of fact, in the past couple of weeks. And he's in pretty bad shape. Well, you know, he's out of the hospital, stuff like that too, but they're in bad financial shape. So we have a stroke drawback assistance fund for him, and it's on giveforward.com. Okay, and they're trying to raise money for good old Daniel T. Jonas. If you go to my Facebook page at Opperman, there's a link on there, giveforward.com, stroke drawback assistance. That's Daniel T. Jonas. So please help him out if you can. Now tonight we got a guy, a fascinating guy, incredible. And it's really funny because we got this guest through William Ramsey, who's been a frequent guest on our show here. Tonight we have Mark Ebner. And when we booked him, I said, hey, what does he do? He's a Scientology expert, they tell me, right? But then I find out, when I'm doing some research on this guy, I find out this is the guy who wrote the book 6 Degrees of Paris Hilton. And I've been telling that story. I'm a big fan of this guy, it turns out. I never knew his name, but I've been a big fan of Mark Ebner for a long time, because I was a big fan of that story, that 6 Degrees of Paris Hilton story. So we got him tonight. Now this guy's a award-winning, New York Times best-selling author. He was a consultant on that Emmy-nominated, South Park show, Trapped in the Closet, which was about, the heterosexual Tom Cruise, the heterosexual actor. Okay, so we got Mark Ebner, man. I don't want to take up any more time. Mark, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, Ed. Thanks for having me. It's always great to participate in a meeting of the investigative mind.
Oh, that's right, because Mark is also a private investigator out in California. I forgot to mention.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's just a handy tool for the investigative journalism. I don't know. It's I'll tell you what. I've spoken to private investigator groups. In fact, it wasn't that long ago where I gave a talk to the Florida State Private Investigator, and they're the most stodgy guys.
Yeah, I know.
I was like, oh, come on, with all your ethics and posturing and this, that, and the other thing. When you're working with a PI license, doors open for you. And for me, particularly writing about crime and criminals, it's gotten me into the federal prisons, the state system, and, hey, it's an amazing tool. But you do the real work. I'm just basically a hack in that regard.
No, I'm a hack too. Don't worry about it. But you get in a group of PIs, these old retired cops, just like you said, they are the worst bunch of gossipy wash women, all reporting each other and turning each other in, and and telling each other you can't do anything.
Right, and they're all humorless. And what's funny about it is you get them in a room, and after you leave the podium, you gave your talk, they all want to tell you or sell you their story. And I'm like, you lost in the first round because you haven't even impressed me with any kind of, sense of color or anything like that. I don't even want to know you, pal. I'm out of here. Thanks for the speaker fee. Talk to you soon.
I was just gonna pitch my story. I guess I'm out in the cold.
Well, yeah, I don't know. It's I am a collector of people's stories, but I'm definitely not the guy you pitch to.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if I was, I'd have a studio deal or something like that. But, maybe I'm a late bloomer or something like that.
Okay, but
anyway.
I've been watching your stuff, and it does seem that you got out there in L.A., and you are kind of hobnobbing with all these people out there. How'd you pull that off? Because you said you came from New England, right?
Right. I was born in Providence, Rhode Island, and raised, came up around organized crime and everything else. I lived in the shadow of the Industrial National Bank building in Providence, which if you ever care to Google image that, you'll remember it. If you're half as old as I am, you'll remember that that was the Superman building. When George Reeves was doing the Superman show in black and white. Yeah, that's the building he flew out of. Well, as a 6-year-old watching black and white Superman, I knew right then and there that I didn't want to be that guy, that pansy in tights and the cape flying around. I liked the idea that he was an ink man. He was a reporter at the Daily Planet. And I resolved at 6 years old that I was going to be a newspaper guy. Lo and behold, through sets of circumstances and educational opportunities and various mentors, that's exactly what I ended up doing. And, no regrets, no looking back, only forward, I always say to people, look, I'll just write till I drop. What better profession is there, really?
Yeah, that's kind of what I said too. Like, I just want to make a living, making jokes on the radio and selling books and stuff like that, It just seems like so much easier than working,
I don't know. Radio is pretty difficult, my man. I had a radio show in 2000 syndicated in, I believe 6 mid-level markets. I wouldn't get New York City. I'd get Albany and Syracuse. I wouldn't get Vegas. I got Reno, So I had all these, mid to low markets. And I'll tell you, that was a real year. I was blessed to have that gig, but wow, radio is one of the hardest things to master. And that's why when people listen to, Rush Limbaugh and whoever else is, commanding the airwaves, they say that they say, I hate that guy. I can't stand him, blah, blah, blah. But these guys are the perfect showmen. They've mastered the art. And, hats off to anyone that can do as much, including yourself, Ed.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Okay. Where would you like to get started? Because you're all, yeah.
Listen, I came out to Hollywood in 1984. I went back to New York. A dear friend of mine named Christian Wright was an editor at Spin magazine, Bob Guccione Jr.'s music-oriented magazine, and she gave me a pop culture story that I had come up with. She gave me the back page in that magazine in 1985. I'm a few years out of college at the time, and it was called Dying to Make a Living. And I was always fascinated by scream queens, the women who specialize in getting killed in horror films.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I just rounded them all up and I interviewed them, and they published my story, and I said, okay, that's it. No looking back. I moved back to LA because, I figured there was, first of all, a lot of my friends had moved out here and were becoming successful in the entertainment business, but I was interested in Hollywood. Not so much the glamour and the glitz as much as I was in what a notoriously criminal town this was. And what an underbelly there was, because in Hollywood it's like, yeah, people come out here. For every person that comes out here to fulfill their dream, there's 10 skeleton cretins lying in wait to destroy their dreams, and that's what made Hollywood interesting to me, in the tradition of James Ellroy, one of my literary heroes, So, I ticked a lot of people off because, instead of doing, I did my share of celebrity profiles, and God forbid I ever have to go back to sitting there across a table from a starlet trying to pull a useful quote out of her, that to me was torture. on the other side of things, I found a treasure trove of reporting. And, one of those stories, like you mentioned, 6 Degrees of Paris Hilton. I'm glad you dig the book. It's one of my proudest achievements. There were a lot of powerful people that tried to suppress that book. I don't mind mentioning them if you're interested.
Yeah, I could probably guess one. Elliot Mintz.
Well, Elliot Mintz now, more Ron Burkle, the billionaire grocer who, he founded, I believe, the Ralph's supermarket chain out here.
Oh, yeah?
He basically, he got seduced by Hollywood and the starlets and the Paris Hiltons and, the whole scene. And, I wrote about him, and at the time the book was to be published by Simon & Schuster, I get a call from my publisher who said, "Mark, congratulations, this is the best written book we've ever published." And I was like, "Well, thank you very much," and by the way, best written book, that was for the particular imprint, which was Simon Spotlight, which was a kind of a pop culture imprint. So I'm not putting myself in league with, Pulitzer Prize winners and writers that have far better chops than I have. Anyway, my point being, she said, but, we're not going to be promoting this book or something to that effect. And what I put 2 and 2 together and realized that this guy, Ron Burkle, had just bought a controlling interest in the Barnes & Noble chain. Well, at the time, 2008, remember, Barnes & Noble was Borders was on the way out. Barnes & Noble was the last, brick and mortar bookstore chain, in the game. And, unfortunately, the short-sighted publishing industry thought that was the only way at the time. They hadn't realized, the other ways you could, sell books. And, so consequently, I felt like that book was buried. Fortunately, I got a bonus. Warner Brothers Television did option the book. As kind of like the pitch was, it's the underside, it's the underbelly of Entourage, Okay,
but wait a second. Why did this supermarket guy, what did he have against that book?
Well, I think he just was embarrassed about the things that I had written about him and didn't want it, just wanted to punish me. Now, I did all due diligence. I called him, I talked to his front guy, and everything else. And I told him what was, essentially what I was going to be publishing, and they never got back to me. So oh well, you had your shot, but like it is so often when you're writing about people that have put themselves in embarrassing and if not criminal situations. And I'm not saying that Ron Burkle is a criminal, but I can say with certainty that he has put himself into a lot of embarrassing situations. Number one, trying to buy his way into Hollywood.
Okay. Oh, so yeah. He didn't like the story you wrote about him, and he wanted to take revenge against you on the Paris Hilton book.
That's what I think.
Okay.
Listen, and I'm not a paranoid type, but I'm telling you, the book should have and could have gotten a lot more media attention than it did. But if you have a publisher that's not behind you marketing it, you might as well just sit back and hope you have something left over from that fat advance they threw your way in the first place.
Yeah,
that's publishing. What do you?
That is a huge story, though. Why don't you tell us the Paris Hilton story?
Well, it started as a Radar magazine article I did about Joe Francis, that Girls Gone Wild goon.
Yeah, sure do. Yeah.
Continually finds himself, being thrown in jail in Las Vegas and getting sued every which way. This is a guy, who basically, he started Girls Gone Wild and, enjoyed the fruits of, prurient frat boys for many years. There was a guy named Darnell Riley, and he is the anti-hero, if you will, of this book, who basically had a grudge against Joe Francis, and essentially the way he was treating women and blah, blah, blah. Now, this guy, Darnell Riley, you don't find a badass badder than this guy. He had committed his first double homicide at 14 in a situation that is like right out of The Wire, if you're a fan of that television series. I mean, this was a kid at 14, who, these crime guys, sent him into a jewelry heist, with cocked and loaded. He videotaped him saying this. He basically, Darnell grabbed a few things of value, threw him into a duffel bag, tied up Joe Francis, threw him in the trunk of his own Bentley, drove him down to the gates of the private estate, left him in the trunk, got picked up by his getaway car, and then he had the boneheaded idea of trying to extort Joe Francis for $500,000 to not release that tape. The problem inherent in that, I'm not calling Darnell Riley a bonehead, because a lot of this was done on a grudge and, because of, Francis's behavior, and he just thought he could make some money at it. But Joe Francis, I mean, is he really going to care if a video of him face down on his bed with a dildo on his butt is released to the public? His ego may care, but you know what? The guy is such a scumbag, it's not like anything really ground shaking. So anyway, Joe Francis got with LAPD and robbery homicide detectives, very shortly thereafter. Court caught Darnell Riley, and he went...
Because Paris Hilton turned him in.
Yeah, she was part of it, absolutely. And, that's, the whole thing. Paris Hilton, wow, crime buster. Wow, she really,
fighter,
yeah, she really is something, isn't she? Well, anyway, at the end of the day, he got 10 years, 6 months, and in Corcoran State Prison up there with Charlie, Manson and Sirhan, and, he knows how to do time. 'Cause I was there at his sentencing and, in shackles, Darnell Riley, when the sentence came down, I mean, he was looking at life, cause you got kidnapping, gun enhancement, all kinds of charges on him, right?
Yeah.
His Better Call Saul, another television show reference to, of course, Breaking Bad, his Better Call Saul lawyer, Ronald Richards, who specializes in these kind of cases. I don't know if you've ever run into Richards. He's quite the character.
No.
Really argued it all down and got a couple of the enhancement charges thrown off. And 10 years was a deal. And, Darnell Riley can do that 10 years standing on his head. And he gave the judge 2 thumbs up with his shackles, and he was taken away. And I said, you know what? That's only the beginnings of the beginning of a crime wave in Hollywood. And I'm going to get to the bottom of this. And with my trusty PI license, I made my way to Corcoran State Prison, and I heard Darnell Riley's tale. Now, remember, you've dealt with cons before. Emphasis on con. You never know whether they're telling you the truth. But there was so much he was telling me that rang true that it was my job in putting together the book 6 Degrees of Paris Hilton. It was my job to go back into the alleys and go across the velvet ropes and go in the underground in Hollywood and talk to the people that were still out there. And, just to, test the veracity of what he was telling me. And Darnell came up, straight up. And consequently, the book came out and, made a little money on the side with Warner Brothers. And Darnell just recently got out of prison, and I'm back in touch with him.
Oh, really? What's he doing now?
I don't know. I was thinking of doing, I was thinking of, I don't care if anybody steals this. It doesn't matter. I've already put it out there. But I thought for an unscripted show, it'd be interesting to have Darnell, be featured with other parolees in a show called On Parole, where you follow them around during their day to day. And, imagine that. And by the way, if some reality skell or, thief wants to lift this after hearing this on YouTube or whatever, you'll have me to contend with, and you don't want to do that. But that said, I think it's interesting. If you have a bunch of parolees, federal and state, and I mean, as unsavory as it sounds, well, that's where I live, but imagine that, these guys with the recidivism rate in a contest show, to see who can stay out of jail, you know?
Yeah, like Survivor.
Yeah, I mean, it's insane. That's where I want to go with it. You know, so I'm working on that with him right now. And you know what? He's game.
Hey,
that's
a good idea. I like that show, yeah.
Of course it is. Don't you dare steal it. I'm going to come looking for you.
Don't worry about it. You'll never find me. But anyway.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, see, you wouldn't find me either, which means that we'd bump into each other by accident.
Yeah, I almost feel like maybe we have already. I gotta tell you.
You never know. I mean, we have people in common. You mentioned Paul Baresi, the bagman. This is a guy, he's a licensed PI now. It took him forever to get that. We should frame it up for your audience. Paul Baresi, came to my attention, 20 years ago. And I was doing a story about, you have, over the years, you have some stories you regret. This was one of them. It was on the gay mafia in Hollywood for Spy Magazine. And, basically I'm not into outing people. I never have been, but I'm also not into the cheeky sort of like magazine treatment that this alleged quote unquote gay mafia in Hollywood was getting in the press. In other words, they'd write about it, but no one mentioned any names, right?
Right.
And I was like, well, that's not reporting. You know what? Listen, if you believe that this is is indeed some sort of a mafia, using that, kind of, I mean, it's not the best word to use, but it works for headlines. I said, I want to know who these people are. So I ended up meeting Paul Baresi, who sat there and revealed to me about his relationship with John Travolta. And as I told you when we were prepping this show, there was nothing transactional about it. And he told me in detail about this relationship. Now, he went on to sell the story. I was John Travolta's lover to the National Enquirer. He sold it for, at the time, it was like six figures, like $100,000. And he ended up retracting it because of all the heat that he was getting from Travolta's lawyers. But I knew that he was telling me the truth, because generally when you talk to cats like this, if there's no money involved, and they're just sitting there and you're talking and they're telling you stuff on the record, then they're more likely than not, they're telling you the truth. If they think they have something to gain, then your radar goes up. Then you start getting suspicious.
Well, let me ask you a question. Baresi, right now, that was his first contact with the tabloids, was when he contacted them to sell a story about Travolta.
Wait. With me?
No, with Baresi.
Baresi wasn't trying to sell me anything. I was just interviewing him about his experience in Hollywood, with the gays who allegedly ran the show in town at the time.
Because at the time he was a gay porn star.
Yes, he was a gay porn star, and I always asked him about that because my second interview with him, I met his lovely wife at the time, and she was cooking spaghetti for us, and I looked at him, and I'm going to try and figure out how to tell you this story without cursing. I said, Paul, now you got to understand, Paul Baresi looks like who was Burt Reynolds would be a good facsimile. I mean, you got to admit the guy was a good looking guy, strong Italian features. He had the equipment for gay porn, straight porn, Playgirl magazine, whatever. And I said to him, and he insisted he was heterosexual. And I said, okay. I said, then how come how do you do it? How do you do gay porn? How do you sleep with John Travolta? How do you do this, that, and the other thing? And he said, Mark, you can imagine the word he used, but he said, my equipment gets hard for money. And that's all I needed to hear. And I guess there are people like that, that, just get so jacked up, by the almighty dollar that it doesn't really matter. How they're going to go about doing it. So consequently, he's the only private investigator I know who is a former gay porn star and director. I mean, I think that's I think that's incredible. You also know that Dan O'Hanks, I operate under his PI license, and Dan O'Hanks is an ex-convict who finally got some sort of a pardon from Schwarzenegger when he was in office, or a letter of rehabilitation. who worked for years under someone else's license to the point where now, in his twilight years as a PI, finally has his PI license, and he's a convicted second story guy. This guy was a straight up criminal.
Well, you know what though? That's really not that uncommon. Most, like 20% of PIs have a misdemeanor conviction.
Mm.
It's
not felonies though.
No, not too many felonies out there. No.
Yeah,
yeah. So that's a good accomplishment. Yeah.
Right, and Dano got it, and anyway, Baresi has done some work with Dano. Paul has, I profiled him in a story I'd like to plug just because I think it deserves readers from now until the end of time. That would be called The Bagman. You can find it on my website, www.hollywoodinterrupted.com. Just search for The Bagman, and I did a profile on him. And, he, like I said, the guy's a Damon Runyon character. He's a classic Hollywood character. This is a guy, who will dig up dirt on a celebrity, say, or has done this. And then he goes to the celebrity's lawyer and says, listen, you want the kibosh put on this? Pony up. And next thing you know, he's got a check with 5 or 6 zeros tracing back right to, the celebrity lawyer. So he plays both ends against the middle. He's the ultimate operator. He knows the underworld like no other because he spent so much time in the muck and mire of it that in many ways he's just this fantastic character. Another television reference. Have you watched Ray Donovan?
No.
Well, if Ray Donovan, that show, he plays a Hollywood fixer. I think they're going into their second or third season right now. If Ray Donovan was just scuff him up a little bit, peel back some of his ethics, and you've got Paul Baresi. So Paul, I think, is a little frustrated that his story has been retold and told so many times, and he's sort of like thinking, "Where's mine?" And I'm like, well, where is yours? That's up to you to make it happen, pal. But you've always been straight up with me.
Yeah, you think a guy with so many connections that he could hook up a deal for himself, because his story is amazing. I was supposed to have him on.
Yeah.
And what happened was I locked myself out of my apartment. So I climbed up to the roof and I tried to lower myself down to my apartment window and I fell off the roof.
Oh,
you know that story?
Well, maybe, I don't know, but maybe that was a blessing in disguise,
But you know the story I'm talking about, right?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I'm all ears.
Okay, I'm going to read some commercials and then we'll get back and we'll talk about the Paul Baresi story about how he represented the transvestites who dated with
Eddie
Murphy. Yeah.
Yes, well, that's featured in my story, The Bagman. That's how that all came about. Amazing what you're going to find about Hollywood lawyers in that story. So read your stuff and we'll be right back.
Thank you, my friend.
Okay.
Pacific West Bamboo. Everybody knows Amanda over at Pacific West Bamboo. If you're listening to the drama in the background with Amanda's story, her peacock was abducted from the front of her home there in Portland, Oregon. But the peacock has been returned. But if you need your number one source for timber construction and craft-grade bamboo poles, plants, and products, they specialize in eco-friendly reclaimed wood products for the home and the garden. Also, craft products are made out of bamboo and stuff like that. Amanda is the bamboo queen of the Northwest. Her number is 503-839-8126. You can email her at demroots@oppermail.com. They've been serving the Northwest for over 10 years, and they have their Facebook page is Pacific West Bamboo. They can and do ship nationwide. Now, they're going to be at the Portland Bamboo Festival. No, in fact, they're done with the Portland Bamboo Festival, but they are going to be at the assisting and building the stage at the art pieces for the Pickathon 2014 in Happy Valley, Oregon. Okay, guys, if you want to sponsor, you can have your ad read here on the Opperman Report. Just contact us at oppermanreport@gmail.com. We're looking for sponsors. Another one of our sponsors is infinityhomeplans.com. Good old Mike Gray. Check out Infinity Home Plans and Design Services, your resource for 3D and 2D architectural services. They offer a multitude of products, including stock home plans, 2D digital drawing sets, 3D models and renderings, and more. That is infinityhomeplans.com. Hey, don't forget my daughter Victoria has a show every Saturday afternoon called Teen Truth on CJ Mars Radio at 1 p.m. on Saturdays afternoons. Okay, emailrevealer.com. Don't forget emailrevealer.com, the home of the online infidelity investigation. Did you know that studies indicate that up to 30% of the people using online dating services are married and cheating on their partner? You contact emailrevealer.com for their online infidelity investigation. This search is for people that have noticed signs of cheating and suspect their partner is cheating online with a secret social networking site like MySpace or Facebook, or a personal ad or an internet dating service. Now, you provide the email address of the suspected cheater, and they search thousands of online personal websites, and they will return a list of all the personal ads and dating sites that email address is registered to. And tonight we have with us Mark Ebner. We're going to be talking about the Church of Scientology, Hollywood Interrupted, 6 Degrees of Paris Hilton, Ain't It Cool, Kicking Hollywood's Butt, all kinds of books, Emmy Award-winning South Park show. Okay, Mark.
Yes.
Okay, let's hear about the story about Paul Baresi and Eddie Murphy.
Okay, Eddie Murphy, as everyone knows, got caught with a, well, let's get our terminology right. Geez, I wouldn't want to offend anybody by saying tranny or something like that. It's hard to keep up with the things that you can and cannot say. But he got caught during the wee hours with a transgendered hooker by the name of, it's a Samoan name, so I may not pronounce it right, but her name was Atasone Seuli, I believe. And pretty little thing, except she was a guy. And he got caught with her in flagrante in his car. Hi, Hugh Grant. You paved the way for this one, I guess. Although Divine Brown, I think she had female genitalia. I've never seen evidence thereof, but I've never cared that much to investigate it that much further. Anyway, Addison and Eddie Murphy caught in flagrante on Santa Monica Boulevard, not far from the transgendered hangout known as the Yukon Mining Company. Eddie's response was, well, I was just being a good Samaritan. You were being a good Samaritan. Come on, you were, you were getting your rocks off. Come on. And that's, where your preference lied, at least for that evening. Anyway, so he gets popped with her. So what happened was that a lot of stories came out about Eddie Murphy's predilection for the transgendered, and these women came out. They came out of the woodwork. Everybody was trying to sell their Eddie Murphy story at the time. So anyway,
they were saying he had a foot fetish with these.
And you know what? I talked to some of them, and
okay, great.
They told me their stories, and I had no reason to disbelieve them. And once again, anyone can refer to the Bagman at www.hollywoodinterrupted.com. Well, anyway, interestingly enough, an attorney by the name of Marty Singer. I don't know if you've gotten a Marty Singer lawyer letter yet in your career, Ed, but if you haven't, frame it, because generally if you were, if you're working as an investigator or a journalist, he's the first person to try and sue you if he thinks that you're going to be maligning one of his clients. Anyway, that didn't stop him from hiring Paul Baresi to go out and round up all these transgendered women and get them to change their stories. they had given to various,
tabloids,
news outlets, tabloids and so forth. And anyway, what he did was, basically he gave Paul a blank check. And, I don't know in what world, a lot of this stuff, was entered into, the court records and things like that. So doesn't it strike you as amazing how Hollywood lawyers, as opposed to other lawyers throughout this great land of ours, are really actually believe they are above the law and they're, and they can do things like suborning perjury, willy-nilly, just by writing a check with the appropriate amount of zeros on it. And, so Paul got them to change their stories and, I guess Eddie Murphy basically got his money's worth, with the, via the chicanery of his own attorney. Paul put himself in the middle of the Michael Jackson, alleged molestation stuff. I mean, he was interviewing the father of one kid who every time he upped the ante, for an offer on the story, Michael Jackson's hand went further down the kid's pants. You figure that one out. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
In other words, that's the world that Baresi lives in, breathes in, and, supported his family in.
Baresi was working for Pelicano, during the Michael Jackson stuff?
Yeah, if you hear it from Baresi, he'll say that he was, Pelicano's right-hand man. I don't know if that was the case, but certainly Pelicano, listen, the baseball bat-wielding Anthony Pelicano, the whole image of him was a guy not to be effed with, if you will, and he would, he made a career out of harassing reporters, many of them friends of mine to this day, he ultimately went down, wiretapping people to get information about, certain lawyers, Burt Field's Ring-a-Bell clients and things like that. And this is another case of Hollywood lawyers thinking they're above the law and actually, being able to succeed at being above the law, because what they're doing is they're the ones paying Anthony Pelicano's bills to dig up dirt on people, right? He throws the illegal wiretaps on, and these lawyers are like, well, we didn't know about that. Oh, you know what? I don't buy that. If you're the employer, you're culpable. That's just how it works in my world, and you will not, you don't get a pass from me. But at the same time, these guys have, $500 an hour billing careers, and guys like Anthony Pelicano, who, I don't know. I think he's kind of an idiot. He took this whole omerta thing, whatever, his whole idea was I'm a man of honor. I'm not going to rat anybody out. And he's doing hard federal time right now. And he's broke.
How much time is he getting?
I think he got the better part of 20. He's not going to be out till he's an old man. He's probably pushing 70 by now.
Yeah.
Or at least in the late 60s. I saw him in an unrelated case down in Safford prison, the federal prison in Safford, Arizona, when I was researching 6 Degrees in Paris Hilton. I had to go see a former ecstasy kingpin, a guy named Louis Ziskin, who comes up in the book. I went to visit him, and there's Pelicano trying to sell the remainder of his tapes, to anyone willing to make an offer. And I said, well, I'm here for you. I'm not here for him. I'm not interested. And besides the fact, so anyway, I mean, this was a guy who was a legend, Anthony Pelicano was, well known and well utilized and well paid. And, he did some shady stuff at the behest of lawyers, or at least the tacit, acknowledgement of lawyers, and he's the one doing time and the lawyers are still cashing checks, and that's how Hollywood works.
Yeah, but you would have thought that Pelicano had so much dirt on so many people.
Exactly. And, once again, his whole thing was he's not a rat. Now, that works great in mob stories, one of which I'm working on right now, but, listen, you're a PI, dude. You have a wife, your family, you're losing everything. If it was me, I would have rolled on those guys in a second, just because this isn't, you know, a code of honor situation. You know, I was employed by you to do this. I did that. And for you to shirk responsibility as the one paying my way, no, if I'm going down, you're going down with me. And in fact, if I can lighten my sentence, I'm going to roll too. I don't care. Call me a rat, call me whatever you want. You know, this is not a man of honor situation. This is a stupid man doing stupid time right now, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, because, you know, he had
and by the way, I am not defending Anthony Pellicano as a man. In fact, the guy was an overblown, egotistical creep, you know, who did some horrible things, you know, like leaving a dead fish on Hollywood trade reporter Anita Bush's car, you know, just wiretapping people for no reason, you know, doing all the stuff that you and I have the skills to do, but even we don't do that because, you know what, we can't be too effective, you know, by breaking laws and getting popped for it.
Well, he had a device that he could record people's phone conversations without attaching any equipment to the line. He was doing it through the phone company.
Yeah, oh yeah, no, and you know, and he had his moles at the phone company. Yeah. It's like, you know, it's like the PI having a mole at the DMV. You know, it's the same thing. You know, except this was a little bit more treacherous and compromising for, you know, a lot of his victims. So screw him. I hope he rots. I mean, in that respect, but at the same time, you know, I don't understand this code that cost him everything. I just don't understand it, because these lawyers are just as big a scumbag as they are. They just have better and pricier suits.
Yeah, but if you go back and look at some of the cases, like the Michael Jackson case, where you can hear him, there used to be transcripts that were available. You all that glitters. You've read those transcripts?
Didn't, but I hear you. I know what you're talking about. Yeah. Yeah,
right. Where he was involved in so many things that could be that could be more damaging to him than these charges he has right now of wiretapping and having a hand grenade and C4 and all this other kind of stuff.
Oh, sure.
Because he did have a hand grenade and C4. Well, he must have been doing something with it. You don't keep that stuff around for no reason.
I know. And you know what? You know, hey, shame on him. The guy was sloppy in the end. You know, he wasn't such a badass after all. You know, that's the way I look at it. You know, like I said, I've known a lot of PIs in my day, and you know, he's kind of like the Joe Francis of PIs. You know,
back to Joe Francis. Now here's a guy that fascinates me in so many ways. Because when he had that private jet.
Yeah.
And he's flying around on his private jet, very often down to Mexico, very often back up to the United States. Now, and he had Paris Hilton was flying around on that jet with him.
Well, sure. I mean, you know, basically, there's a very fine line between Paris Hilton and, you know, the run-of-the-mill working girl. There always has been.
Right. No, let's get into that, because a lot of those other numbers in Paris Hilton's phone were for escort services and bail bondsmen and bounty hunters. And it was a slew.
Absolutely. You know, I mean, this is the thing. And let's face it, you know, how did she really become famous? From her sex tape, you know? Right. I mean, that was pretty much what put her on the map. And she, you know, and she set the trend for, you know, everyone all the way through to, you know, Kim Kardashian, you know, and this was, and this is what, you know, culture has become as, you know, perpetrated by tabloid media, is that, you know, it's put into, you know, teenage girls' minds throughout the country that, you know, listen, you want to make it in Hollywood, do a sex tape. Right. You know.
Interesting, though, that the guy in that sex tape, Rick Solomon,
Rick Solomon,
later on married Pam Anderson.
Pam Anderson, yeah, and but wasn't it over like a gambling debt or something?
I've heard those stories as well. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Rick Solomon, you know, this is another guy. You know, I approached him straight up to talk to me for 6 Degrees of Paris Hilton, and he couldn't be bothered. So I can't be bothered with him. You know, he's a decent poker player. You know, I think he's made a little money this year. You know, but basically, you know, as far as I'm concerned, you know, he's a pussy for not stepping up and talking to me. You know, that's the way I feel about these people, you know.
I got you.
Yeah.
Now, what do you think about, I always suspected that Joe Francis had a hand in selling that sex tape.
He may well have. There was red light media. There was, listen, it wasn't a hard sell. You know, the internet was just waiting for something like that, you know. And but in the end, I believe they split the proceeds, and they both made a small 7 figures off that. You know, so, come on. I mean, you know, all her histrionics and, you know, grabbing the sex tape off, you know, newsstand racks and, throwing them on the ground in front of, paparazzi and all that. That was all a big show. That's what made her, and she might as well own it and accept it in her dotage, if you will. Because she ain't getting any younger.
Right. And also, too, she was never really a debutante or an heiress because all that Hilton money was long gone by the time her parents.
Her parents were in real estate, for God's sakes. I mean, they had some loot, you know, but
not Hilton money, yeah.
No, we're not talking about big Hilton money. So, in many respects, she, you know, did make her money on her own, and she did, kind of brand herself out there to some degree. But if there's no talent to back it up, ultimately, who cares? She's like yesterday's tabloid news.
Yeah, you know? But she still gets that appearance money for opening clubs and stuff like that.
I suppose, you know, but, every time, you know, she goes to the Middle East or, you know, Dubai or something like that, I don't know, what the appearances entail, but, you know, whether you're the Sultan of Brunei or the Prince of Dubai, those visits are not, those visits are conjugal.
Those are special appearances.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Now, you must have, what do you know about these celebrity sex tape deals? You must hear about.
I brokered one.
Okay, good.
And, let me just tell you, this was, when I say that in the same breath, I want to say, but I'm not a sex tape broker. Well, I'm not, because I just don't want to be in that world. I've met too many of those people, and they're ruthless, they're scumbags, they want to destroy people's lives, and that's how they get their jollies and they get paid. For me, it was a situation whereby I was working something with Dan O'Hanks, and we came upon I call it the foreplay video involving Rebecca Gayheart. You may remember her. She was kind of an actress, but more a spokesmodel for Revlon or actually not some beauty product. She's married to this actor, Eric Dane, who was on one of those doctor shows or something like that. Anyway, they hooked up with a woman who was the former Miss Teen America. Her name's Carrie Ann Paniche.
Okay.
And, she was working as a escort / madam at the time. How do I know that? I went to her house. I asked her if she was, and she told me she was. That's all I need to know. She did everything short of showing me her black book. Anyway, she did a threesome with him. And the threesome, basically it was pretty boring stuff. It was Eric Dane walking around with his junk out, smoking a joint. There were other drugs involved. Everybody got naked and they wound up in a hot tub. So I'm looking at this, and the only thing, I'm sitting there with Dano, and I'm like, listen, it's still kind of just the scene, it's kind of like a sex tape, and you know what? I'm all for making a buck, but we got to wrap a story around this. And the story was, here they are using the services of a known madam. So, what we did was, and this is the classic PI move, Dano and I got in touch. We had a reserve cop. I don't need to mention him, from LAPD. We got him. We did a sit down at a Starbucks with, 2 Hollywood Vice detectives. And, we had them, we discussed what was on the tape. We gave them the tape. They bagged it. They tagged it. And they gave us a receipt. Now, in my world, in journalism, now you have an ongoing investigation. Hence, you have a story. Did the outlet that ultimately put that tape up really wrap my story around it. Hell no, they were trying to get traffic via the tape, and they sure did. And I've worked with that outlet on a number of occasions. Gawker Media. I was also responsible for giving him the Tom Cruise crazy tape. That indoctrination video where he's, spouting off all this Scientologies and, acting more stupid than he did on Oprah's couch, if you know what I'm saying. Anyway,
Wait, so you're behind that tape?
Absolutely behind that tape.
How'd you get your hands on that?
A guy named Mark Bunker, who is a long time vocal critic of Scientology and videographer, it was given to him, and he's making a documentary I should plug called Knowledge Report, and it's about Scientology. It should come out soon, I hope. I'm in it, for God's sakes, but it's actually going to be pretty good. Mark Bunker had come into possession of that crazy tape, and he put it on an FTP website, where password protected and nobody can see it. So he gave me a peek about midnight, and I see it and I say, "Oh, this is gold. You mind if I, let loose in the media with this?" And he said, "No, go ahead." He was fine with it. So I basically electronically tapped the owner of Gawker, Nick Denton, on the shoulder via instant message, and
we got a break coming up. Yeah, we got a break.
Okay.
Mark Ebner, man. We're going to be back in about 5-6 minutes. This is that long break I was telling you about.
Okay. See you in 5 or 6.
Incredible guy. His website is HollywoodInterrupted.com. I got a bunch of his books up on my blog, The Opperman Report. 6 Degrees of Paris Hilton, Hollywood Interrupted, Poison Candy. That's a story about Dahlia DiPolito. That's a Florida woman hired a hitman to kill her husband. That's a fascinating story as well. And Being Uncle Charlie. It's a new one out. And he was just telling me before that it's #1 bestseller in Canada right now in true crime on every book that's up on the top left shelf of Barnes & Nobles in Canada. We'll be back right after this with Mark Ebner. Welcome back to the Opperman Report every Friday night, 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. Simulcast on CJ Marnes Radio and 365 Live, rebroadcast throughout the week, blah, blah, blah. Okay, don't forget, Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com is a listener-sponsored station. If you like what you're hearing, if you want to keep the shows going, you got to go to freedomslips.com, look for the donate button, click on that, and donate to the station. Okay, we are here tonight with Mark Ebner, author of many, many books. Has a blog, a website called HollywoodInterrupted.com. He wrote a book with Andrew Breitbart. He's a part of a Emmy Award-winning South Park show, a New York Times bestseller, Hollywood Interrupted. 6 Degrees of Paris Hilton. Many of these books are available through a link on my website, the Opperman Report blog. You can click on there and go straight to Amazon.com. Okay, we were just talking about brokering these sex tapes, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, we were talking about the Tom Cruise crazy tape and
right.
how that made its way to the internet. And very simply, like I said, I got, Mark Bunker, vocal, professional, Scientology critic. He, let me have a peek at it. I said, can I put this out there? He said, sure. I get Nick Denton of Gawker Media on the phone or on instant message. He says, wow, can I have that? And, I've made a cottage industry out of exposing Scientology over the years since, my story in Spy Magazine, Do You Want to Buy a Bridge, came out in 1996. So I'm an OG. I'm an original gangster Scientology critic. And anyway, that story came out and, since then I've become sort of a go-to guy when it comes to all things Scientology. And, like I said, I'll step up. But for this, I wasn't really thinking of the value of the tape. and I gave it to Gawker Media for fun and for free. And let me tell you something, when that came up the next morning, it went nuts. I mean, the traffic was up into the seven figures right away, and it hasn't stopped. It's probably been viewed over 100 million times around the world. And I'm not exaggerating.
No, not at all. That thing was a gold mine, and you shouldn't have gave it away. You should call me.
Well, yeah, no, I know. I shouldn't have. But you know what? It was one of those things. You know what? Hey, this is, when Andrew Breitbart and I were writing Hollywood Interrupted back in 2004, the late, great Andrew Breitbart, one of my dear friends, who died too soon.
Yeah.
Anyway, what we did was Tom Cruise comes up in the book a few dozen times. But when we were finishing our final manuscript to submit to the publisher, who was the publisher? John Wiley and Sons. I said, hey, Andrew, this will be funny. Every time let's do a search and replace on Tom Cruise's name. And you alluded to this at the top of the show. Every time his name came up, we inserted the heterosexual in front of his name because it was just taking a dig at him. Well, I think who cares if he's gay, straight, or whatever? That wasn't the point. The point was he's the type of guy who would sue you if he even suspected you thought he was gay. So we just stuck it to him by calling him the heterosexual Tom Cruise about 40 times. So you can see what I think of Tom Cruise as the poster boy for Scientology.
Oh, wait, I got to tell you something. Get this, man.
Yeah.
Wait, no, first, I got a question for you first. Then don't let me forget this, though.
No.
Was that Mission Impossible music in the background originally, or was that added?
Yeah, and I'm just saying, that just goes to show how shameless Scientology is under the guise and the masquerade of the idea that they call themselves a religion, when in fact they are not a religion. In fact, they are an evil, criminal, totalitarian mind control cult. They can just sample that music like that. I mean, if that was out anywhere else, wouldn't it be incumbent on Warner Brothers or whatever the Mission Impossible studio was? I may have my studios mixed up. Or the composer of that music. That guy was, he's legendary. And I'm embarrassed to say the composer's name escapes me, but people should look it up and ding me on not remembering that. But, the idea that Scientology appropriated that music is pretty disgusting in and of itself. But
it made him look more crazy, though.
Well, but that's Scientology. It's a crazy cult. They don't understand the media. They don't know how to work it. The chickens have come home to roost for that cult,
Okay, on that note, get this, man. A couple of years ago, here in Vegas, they have a San Gennaro feast, okay?
Mm-hmm.
A couple of years ago, me and my daughter were there. We go every single year, and we're walking through the booths, and they had a booth there where they would check your spine to see if you were, whatever. Yeah. And and then they hand you a Scientology thing, right? Pamphlet.
Yeah.
So as soon as I saw it, I handed it right back to him. I got a little pissed off. We found out that Tom Cruise was there working that booth.
Is that right?
Yeah. And the thing where you do the water pistols, when you pop the balloon, he was over there playing that game.
I'll tell you what, that is just an insult to Italian Americans everywhere.
Yeah, right.
San Gennaro. No offense to Las Vegas, but you want to see me at San Gennaro, you'll see me in Little Italy in New York. But,
I know. Or Staten Island, yeah.
Actually, I had a nice Italian meal. How do you pronounce that restaurant? Is it Rao's or Rao's?
Rao's.
Yeah, Rao's. And the one they opened in, where my dad got married for one of his, Caesar's Palace.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, they put out a good spread there, I gotta say. Absolutely. But, so anyway, that's funny. He showed up for, San Gennaro Fest to promote his silly, wacky cult, oh well.
No announcement, no news coverage, no nothing, just there working a booth.
Oh my God, and he's such a friendly, fun, carefree guy that he would do something like that. God, oh.
Let me ask you this now, because I know I've watched all your stuff about Scientology, okay? Yeah. And you went undercover and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But now what about the history of Scientology with L. Ron Hubbard and Aleister Crowley?
Well, it's all true.
And the Moonchild, stuff like that. But I never hear you talk about it, though.
Well, it's been well documented. There are great books that have, came before I came down. There's A Piece of Blue Sky is a good book. By John Atack. Another good book that covers all that stuff would be L. Ron Hubbard, Messiah or Madman, by Bent Corydon or Corydon, Corydon, and another, Scandal of Scientology by Paulette Cooper, who was harassed mercifully by the cult when she wrote that little book, So, people have covered all the, the black magic and the Aleister Crowley and stuff. Listen, for me, it's all very interesting from a historical perspective, but, listen, Hubbard was such a blatant crackpot when you look at his history that, I just look at that, and I look at, his doctrine. And, people say, oh my God, when you explain it to them, they're like, how can people be so stupid, to join this cult? And my answer is always the same thing. Listen, do not ever underestimate the power of mind control. And that is, you should get a cult expert on. I can recommend it for you, sometime, for you. But, it's not like, I'm careful not to use the word brainwashing. I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but when you see mind control and, doctrine over mind, people could say, well, religions do that too. But yeah, but you know what? There's a choice involved. In a cult, all your choice, all your rational thinking is taken away from you, and it destroys lives. So when you meet the people that have gotten out of Scientology after 20, 30 years in, whoa, these people are angry. And you know what? Who can blame them? They want their lives back. It's like coming off, as L. Ron Hubbard's former top PI guy told me before he passed away. He said to me, it's like coming off a bad acid trip, except it's 30 years later. And yeah, I'm pissed. I want my life back. So in terms of advocacy journalism, that and busting up a dogfighting ring in South Central LA, are two of my proudest achievements in terms of, doing something good and exposing, things that are so inherently evil.
Yeah, I would agree with you. But now, don't you think that the basis of Scientology, though, is basically satanic?
Yeah, well, no, I wouldn't even give him that much credit. He was involved in a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
But I think the basis of it is a hodgepodge of everything that L. Ron Hubbard stole from the masters, i.e. Sigmund Freud, Carl Jung, the master philosophers and actual psychiatrists and psychologists who, he stole this, he made his own doctrine out of it and his own money-making scam out of it, and then, to corner the market, declared that the very people he stole from were the arch-enemies of Scientology. That's why Scientology is, ardently anti-mental health in any way, shape, or form. In other words, and to drive the totalitarian point about them home, we're the only ones. And you hear Tom Cruise parroting this stuff. We're the only ones who can save this planet. Blah, 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 blah. Well, clearly you're not. And as I said in, that story, Do You Want to Buy a Bridge? I said, if you're so all-powerful and you have control over matter, energy, space, and time, like you say you do with all this, cosmology and, UFO, bullcrap that Hubbard came up with, why can't you create a hit out of that movie Far and Away? What's up with that, Mr. Powerful? Your movie is a bomb. You know? And, it's, that was my whole attitude. So anytime I'm called upon to mock Scientology and expose them further, I'm more than happy to do it. I've been doing it for 2 decades now.
Okay. Now, what is your take, on the Process Church of the Final Judgment?
I've heard about Process. Sounds like a cult to me. I haven't looked into them too much. I think that a lot of them, when you look for the roots of these things, you look to any charismatics. You look at Est and Werner Erhard, and you look at Landmark Forum, and you look at Scientology, and I would assume the Process. I think they're all just, what they do is, they take their devotees and they isolate them from the rest of the world. And, they make them think that, this is their only way to true salvation. And they make these promises. In the meantime, they have their other hand in your wallet. And, that's all I can say. I don't know Process too much, but I'm sure there are experts out there that can talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I was going to say something.
Scientology. We've got
no. Back to Scientology though. Now, when you were doing this story, and I know that you were being followed, you were under surveillance and stuff like that, but did you ever really think that your life was in danger?
No, because Scientology, as I often say, is not a snake in the mailbox cult, and by that I mean cults far more dangerous than Scientology. Synanon would be one of them. Do you remember them?
Yeah, I do remember. Yeah, I think we're about the same age. How old are you?
I'm 54.
Yeah, I'm 53.
Oh, okay. So Synanon was that drug rehab cult,
Sure.
and that's what they do. They prey on the downtrodden, and Scientology is no exception. It's like, any problem you have, I want to get off drugs, or I'm down and out, or blah blah blah. These are the perfect victims. They're vulnerable. People ask why actors and celebrities join it, and I say, well, listen, at the very core of, an actor lies a very insecure human being, if you ask me, and then you look at their lives. Okay, granted, we shouldn't feel sorry for them. They make all kinds of money, but in essence, their life is very transient by nature, it's one job to the other. They're the most, least esteemed people I have ever met are actors and actresses. Now, it's funny, when I did the Daily Show with Jon Stewart, promoting Hollywood Interrupted, he dinged me on that. He goes, that's what my people are, the Jews. We trade in that, the low self-esteem and all that. And, I had fun going back and forth with him about it, but it is true. Actors, they're not all that smart. They're not all that there. They get used to being coddled and cosseted and, red carpeted. And Scientology is the perfect religion for that, because really do make them special. Hell, what religion do you know that has celebrity centers around the world that cater to the whims of their celebrity adherents? Scientology does, you see, and those people end up becoming unwitting dupes and poster children for the cult. And, it's funny, when people get out, Paul Haggis, the screenwriter, recently left in the last couple of years, and now he's totally anti-Scientology. When they do get out, and then Jason Begay, a fine character actor, you can see his work on that show, Chicago Fire. These people are, were very brave to come out against Scientology and to leave the cult and, at the risk of harming their careers. But you know what? That career harming ship is past, because people like myself, and I'll take credit for it, we just didn't care. When that story came out, Hollywood wouldn't have anything to do with me except pat me on the shoulder and whisper in my ear, hey, nice job, Ebner. But at the same time, they were all invested in the Kirstie Allies, the John Travoltas, the Tom Cruises, the Jenna and Bodie Elfmans, the Ann Archers, this, that, and the other thing. And so they didn't want to be associated with me for telling the truth about, their cash cows. and that was clearly it. But, once Cruz started jumping on couches and going after Matt Lauer on the Today Show, the tide turned, and it didn't, it wasn't a moment too soon. Now we're watching Scientology, go the way of all the piddling, horrible cults that came before it and eventually disappeared or killed themselves off,
Yeah, I think their center here in Vegas actually closed down.
Oh, I'm sure. Listen, people are hip to it now.
Yeah.
The beauty of the South Park episode, and I think it was funny because, when I went back to speak at my college, a couple of years ago to the senior class at Bard College in New York, the graduating class, it was so funny. They had me come speak, and that particular speaker is chosen by the senior class. And when I got there, I was like, oh shit, excuse my language.
That's okay.
I was like, oh, they know my work, and this will be great, blah, blah, blah. Turned out they had me just because they knew I was involved in the Trapped in the Closet episode of South Park. Doesn't say much for my college, but it does say a lot for South Park, and Matt Stone and Trey Parker, the creators of that show, that had me in to consult on it, because that little widely seen, everybody knows it, everybody's seen it, that particular episode managed to teach the world and cut through all the labyrinthian sort of code language that cults use. They have their own languages, and break it down. They would put up Lord Xenu, all the cosmology, all the volcano and science fiction, bogus stuff about Scientology, and they put that on the screen in a cartoon form, and then they would flash a sign repeatedly that said, "This is what Scientologists actually believe." And you know what? People got it. And they were like, oh my God, this, and they never look at Tom Cruise the same way again. I'm telling you. And, listen, it sounds like I have something personal against the guy. Well, I will say this. I think he's a victim because he's so indoctrinated in the cult, and I should show a bit more compassion for him like any other cult victim. But at the same time, when you're promoting it and ruining people's lives, I don't have any sympathy for you, heterosexual Tom Cruise.
Yeah, it does seem like there's a blackmail factor in the whole Scientology thing, especially with the more public figures. And it's come a long way, because I remember when the internet first came out and they had those, the Usenet groups, people debating,
yes.
Right.
They're alt-religion Scientology. That's right. OG stuff you're talking about now.
Right.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And when I first heard the story about Xenu, it was like top secret back in those days, and now everybody knows and laughs.
Right, exactly. Because it was just too far out there to be believed. But those of us who were lurking on, the various news groups that were available realized that, hey, the cat's coming out of the bag, and this is actually their doctrine, and this Xenu story is what they end up paying $250,000 and up to find out, after all that mind control. And let me tell you something, it's very powerful, because at the base levels, when they, with what they call auditing and things like that, all stolen stuff, by the way, it's basically talk therapy and hypnotism, but what they do is, they make you feel good because, hey, when you, when you divulge, in the sanctity of what you believe is an actual church, your innermost secrets, right?
Yeah.
There's something very freeing about that. And, you come out, feeling exhilarated, and that's sort of like the payoff. And they keep giving you more and more experiences like that till the point where you're so high up in Scientology and so indebted to Scientology that you don't know black from white. And you know what? You're going to buy all that space opera BS, hook, line, and sinker. And that's how cults work. And they were very good at it for a time. Not so much anymore, Scientology, because you know what? Nobody's joining anymore. Oh, they still have money. Yeah, they have money. They're real estate rich. But you know what? It won't be long before David Miscavige, the chairman of the board and Tom Cruise's butt boy, if you will, pardon the expression. I mean, they're, it won't be long before they have to sell all that stuff up, and they'll become a shell of the cult that they once were.
Okay, Ted Gunderson used to say that the Church of Scientology had better surveillance and better intelligence network than the FBI had in California.
I believe it, but you remember, like everything else, like the music industry, like the film industry, like everything else, they didn't see the power of the internet coming.
Gotcha.
And like Robert Vaughn Young, the guy I alluded to earlier, L. Ron Hubbard's former PR guy, who wrote a lot of Hubbard stuff, Robert Vaughn Young said to me, and you can read the quote in Do You Want to Buy a Bridge at www.HollywoodInterrupted.com. He said, the internet is Scientology's Waterloo, and it certainly was.
Now, I have a frequent caller who's always telling me about the connections between Louis Farrakhan and the Church of Scientology. What do you know about that?
Well, that's another thing. They in another despicable display of desperate opportunism, if that even makes sense and doesn't contradict itself. They got with Farrakhan and the NOI as a way of reaching out to to a wider demographic, and, listen, Farrakhan, aligned himself back with them because he saw, whoa, you know what? We're selling bean pies on the street, right?
Yeah.
With our guys in their bow ties, looking at you when you pull up, to a stoplight in South Central LA. They're all smiles, but they're hating you because you're the blue-eyed devil, right? I mean, that's what Farrakhan preaches. Am I mistaken? No, I think not. And so it's just one hate group getting with another, for some reason, Farrakhan bought into a lot of the Hubbard, doctrine and, thought it would be fortuitous if they created some sort of a merger. So there definitely is a connection between Scientology and Nation of Islam. And by the way, I don't think that panned out too well because the guys are still selling bean pies. They're not selling Cadillacs. The Scientology orgs are empty. They, you go anywhere. The one in Vegas is closed. No shocker there. You know what I'm saying?
Louis Farrakhan too. Because they also have like a secret final where they let you in on what the religion's really about, and their theory is that there's a 6,000-year-old mad scientist that created the world.
Okay.
Named Zaku.
Okay.
So it's almost the same thing as Xenu.
Yeah. Well, listen. Farrakhan. Who knows? The guy's not going to be around much longer, but there'll be another zealot to pop up right behind him. So this kind of stuff doesn't stop, but it's nice to put a stop to it when you can.
Okay, I heard on one of your interviews today, you were talking about that you have a book ready to go about Mel Gibson.
Well, not quite that. If anyone wants to see what I've done is, people like to, they really don't like me defending Mel Gibson. I don't necessarily defend him, but like any man who has said the wrong thing from the wrong end of a bottle of scotch,
yeah,
I tend to believe that they have a problem and that there may be some redemption there. Mel Gibson is one of those people. Mel Gibson has proven his mettle in entertainment as an actor, director, and a producer, and I might add someone who puts his own money where his mouth is when he can't work within the studio system, and has created hit after hit in the Jesus splatter film, Passion of the Christ, in Apocalypto, which wasn't even in English. For God's sakes, the whole movie was in Aramaic, and that was a major hit.
Yeah.
And he was lining his own pockets. Now look at this. All of a sudden, he did say some anti-Semitic things. Where that comes comes from, we can speculate. I'm actually on a show on the Reels Network, probably airing all week. So it's called Hollywood Secrets, where I talk about with other quote-unquote experts about Mel Gibson. But the fact was, Mel Gibson, is a drunk. His wife had him on a short leash for a number of years, and he fell off the wagon over a bottle of scotch someone opened at a restaurant for him up in Malibu. He gets in his car, and next thing you know, he's spouting anti-Semitic stuff at a cop. And that snowballed into all his other problems. And you know what? I'm sorry, but if anyone understands alcoholism, the best analogy is just shoves its dirty fist right up your butt, comes up right out your mouth, and does all the talking for you. And so I can't absolve him responsibility for things that he said and done, but I can't ignore his talent either. And I can't ignore him as a human being with the possibility of redemption. So I wrote a proposal, a book proposal. And I thought it would be, because I couldn't get his cooperation at the time, and I'm still waiting for that day. Until that day, Mr. Gibson, that you want to collaborate on your memoir, I'm waiting for you. But at that point, I was like, well, let's sell it as an unauthorized biography. I've got plenty of people. I work with a guy, Paul Cullum, who just knows all the film stuff. I work with a lot of people who can help me get to the bottom of this guy and figure him out. And I wrote the proposal. It's posted on www.hollywoodinterrupted.com to show the world that not one, not two, not three, not a half a dozen, 25 publishers rejected that out of pocket. And that's systemic. That's like Hollywood, because Hollywood came out and they decided to shun Mel Gibson. Mel Gibson was up for a cameo, a career rejuvenating cameo in the second installment of what was
Hangover.
that? Yeah, Hangover Part 2. Listen, they've already used a rapist, a convicted rapist by the name of Mike Tyson. But, not Mel Gibson. Ooh, he said some bad things. This guy's the devil himself. We will not work for him and he should be shunned. No, clean up your own side of the street. Anybody who says that kind of stuff. Let me see where's your sex tape? Come on. You're as dirty as the day is long and you're trying to shun Mel Gibson? Give me a break. So it's not so much that I became Team Mel Gibson as I wanted to, as Andrew Breitbart and I did in Hollywood Interrupted, I wanted to expose the hypocrisy of Hollywood for one of the, by casting their biggest earners in history. And second of all, shine the light on them a little bit.
Well, Gibson has such a fascinating story anyway. The whole thing with his father and he has a Catholic church on his property. He has his own private Catholic church.
Yeah, and listen, you could argue that that's a pretty wacky interpretation.
It's interesting.
Scripture, it is interesting, but his father Hutton was quite a zealot, and by all accounts, quite an anti-Semite, and I'm sure that the catchword of the day, if you talk to these profilers and stuff like that, they'll tell you that. Mel Gibson may well have been groomed, is the word, by his father from an early age. And who am I to dispute that? It seems like that's a logical thing. And I think Mel Gibson, in his heart of hearts, if he's got friends that stand by him like Jodie Foster, if he's got, friends, all his co-stars, anyone that's ever worked with him, will tell you, that this is not, the man that you heard on those tapes, including, that Oksana woman that, he allegedly, manhandled and blah, blah, blah. And, we heard the tape and he's really sounds very violent with her, screaming at her, threatening her, saying, racist and anti-Semitic things, and blah, blah, blah. Yes, he did say all these things. But let's flip the script on this. This is another thing that bothers me, Ed. Every time one of these celebrities is caught saying something, politically incorrect, all of a sudden they got to go go on an apology tour. You know, I'm sick of that. You know, I want to find out what's going on in Israel. You know, I don't want to hear, you know, who's the latest guy? He was one of the oh God, what's that guy's name? He was in The Wolf of Wall Street. Jonah Hill.
Right.
Yeah, one of these paparazzi scumbags from TMZ caught him on camera, and he told him to fillet him and called him the F word, you know, about, gays, you know, the slur. And all of a sudden he's on a, you know, tearful apology tour. I'm like, you know what? You said it, own it. Okay? Yes, you can apologize for it, but you know what? You don't have, stop clogging up the news cycles with your mea culpas. We're all human beings. We've all said things that we regret. Be human. You're not that important.
Well, and you know what? And you don't have to do that, because look at a guy like Charlie Sheen, who never, the guy's pulling a knife on his wife on Thanksgiving, you know, you know what I mean? Another girl gets shot in the butt on a treadmill in his house.
Yeah, listen, imagine if Kurt Cobain were alive today, what he might have to say about Courtney Love. My opinion is, she nagged me to death.
Yeah.
You want to know how I died? Take a look at my ex. You know, but, you know, Courtney's another one that, Courtney Love is just a real brief anecdote. Hollywood Interrupted. When we were putting the proposal for that together, we had our agent, David Vigliano of Vigliano and Associates in New York at the time. We sent him the proposal, Breitbart and I, we sent him the proposal, and he said, hey, this is really good. We're going to make some money on this book. But by the way, take out every reference to Courtney Love, Kurt Cobain, and their manager, Jeff Barber. And I said, what? I said, are you kidding me? You know, we had just come up with the title, Love Means Never Having to Say You're Courtney. And we loved that chapter as outlined, and we were prepared to write it. And he said, and I said, what's up with you, agent? Is this a deal breaker? And he said, yeah, I'm afraid it is, Mark. And I was like, well, I'm afraid you're fired. You know, cross Madison Avenue, find another agent, the good people at Harold Ober and Associates. They sold that book at auction within 48 hours. Turns out my agent represented Courtney Love and Kurt Cobain estate. Oh, he could have said there was a conflict of interest, but no, I don't think so. You represent somebody, you fight for them. And I don't care who your client is and what the conflict is. You work for me, you get a percentage of my, don't tell me what I can and cannot put in a book. And that's my Courtney Love story.
And, by the way, we had Courtney Love's father on our show a couple of weeks back, Hank Harrison.
He's a piece of work.
Oh, he's a fascinating guy, man.
Sure.
Hey, let me read some ads real quick, really fast. InfinityHomePlans.com. This is Mike Gray. Check out Infinity Home Plans and Design Services, your resource for 3D and 2D architectural services. They offer a multitude of products, including stock home plans, 2D digital drawing sets, 3D models, renderings, and more. That is InfinityHomePlans.com. And then you got Pacific West Bamboo, 503-839-8126. You can email them at demroots@oppermail.com. Don't forget, in Pacific West Bamboo, that's their Facebook page. They're the #1 source for timber construction and craft-grade bamboo poles, plants, and products. They specialize in eco-friendly reclaimed wood products for the home and garden. They're located in Portland, Oregon, but they can and do ship worldwide. And don't forget, emailrevealer.com, home of the online infidelity investigation. You think your spouse is cheating online? Hire emailrevealer.com. Okay, and we're here with Mark Ebner, man. Mark Ebner. Fascinating guy, man. This guy got all the dirt on everybody, man. We only got 20 minutes left. And if you want to do an after show, man, you're welcome. I'd love to do it with you. We could take some listener calls.
I was expecting my girl to show up with some food, but I told her to come after 8. So if you want to mix it up in the after show, I'm all
I
good.
know it, man. I know, because you love to talk, man.
Sure.
You got a lot of good stuff. Thank you, man. I really appreciate it.
That's all right. That's all right. Help you pay the bills.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you.
All right.
Oh, now, what do you got now? I know you were telling me about this newest book, with the Canada mobster guy. Tell us about that.
Well, all right. The guy's name is Bob Deasy, Deasy. a conduit, a Hollywood guy down here. He said, you got to meet this guy, and told me a little bit of his story. He flew the guy down from Florida. We had a summit meeting in my manager Joel Gottler's office, and he told his story about being undercover for 25 years. Now imagine that. Imagine just being undercover, and you've got surveillance equipment strapped to you, and you're chasing a drug kingpin through Pearson Airport in Toronto, and all of a sudden, Uncle Joe sees you and says, "Hey, Bob, you still with the OPP?" And then all of a sudden your cover's blown. I love the tension inherent in a story like that. But the guy was really good at what he did, and he rose to the level of, I believe, what the equivalent of sergeant detective. I mean, he got way up, but, he got to a point in his career where he didn't want to do administrative stuff. He needed a steering wheel in front of him and a road, to run down. And, he broke up the Motor Hells Angels. I mean, he was all over the place. His career culminated, and this anecdotally is probably the best way to describe it. He became Mr. Big. Now, Mr. Big is a law enforcement scheme that became popular throughout Canada, where what happens is, okay, Ed, you committed a murder in Newfoundland like 20 years ago. We know you did it, okay? But you've been hiding out. We've never been able to pin it on you. And short of a confession, you're going to get away with this, right?
Okay.
So what happens is Bob Deasy, undercover, became Mr. Big. In other words, he became the boss of a crime faction, if you will, in, the greater Toronto area. And what he did was, he'd find this guy who committed a murder, a cold case, and they put his sights on him. And he'd have his scrubs on the street, who were also cops, recruit him at great expense into their crime family. Okay, and, they'd start off with a truck hijacking or something. Everything's staged. You see, it's all done by the cops, right? And, they get the guy's trust, and they give him money, and they pay him. And this guy's been living, to the wind, for all these years, trying to stay out of trouble, but he can't resist it. And he gets involved, and they say, hey, look, you've been doing a good job. Mr. Big wants to meet you. So a meeting is set up at in a suite at the Four Seasons in Toronto. They walk this guy in, and the way the Mr. Big op works is this. Bob will be sitting there with all the bling, and he'll say, listen, my friend, I've heard some good things about you. You've been doing some good work for me out in the street. And I'm thinking you might want to become part of this family. And of course, this kid is like, oh, heck yeah. What do I have to do? Who do I have to, what? Of course he wants to be in. He's already gotten a taste. The law enforcement went to great expense to bring him up in this fake gang, right? Mm. And then he says, but you know what? I got to tell you, if you walk out of this hotel and hit the street and you get pinched, the first name you're going to give up is mine. And the guy will go, oh, no, I'm not a rat, I never would say anything, blah, blah. Bull crap, right? You know how I know that? Because, listen, if I get pinched, I'm giving you up, MF. You know what I'm saying? So don't give me that, stuff about honor. You got to give me something of equal or greater value about you, In other words, you know me, you know where I am, you know this thing of ours, right?
Yeah.
Give me something on you, and within 15 minutes, he had the guy admitting on tape, wired, to that cold case murder. And then the guys who pick him up in the limo when he leaves, thinking he's part of the crime family, they've got the limo wired and get him to repeat the same stuff. That stuff goes into evidence, and the guy's doing life in prison, and rightly so. So, it all culminated into the Mr. Big scenario. And so that was a great book, Being Uncle Charlie.
And this guy was doing this for 25 years? The same gag over and over?
No, Mr. Big, he elevated to that. He started out doing, drugs. up in First Nations, up by the Arctic Circle. I mean, that's how vast his story is. How he came up from the lowest ranks to, to becoming Mr. Big. It's the guy's law enforcement memoir. But the kind of thinking that goes into being undercover. I mean, let's face it, you're not a criminal, but you spend the greater part of your waking hours certainly thinking like one to get the job done.
Yeah,
if you know what I'm saying. And that's how it is being a good PI. Dan O'Hanks, I'll say his name again. I don't want to plug him too much.
No, go ahead.
Buffoon that he is. But the guy is good because, he is an ex-con. He is an ex-felon, and he goes by the takes one to know one rule. And who better do you want, as a DEA informant or whatever hat he's wearing at any particular time as an investigator than someone who knows the people that he's investigating like they're his own kin. You know what I'm saying? So there's, that's what's happening to this guy. And so Bob Deasy was that guy. I mean, he literally, became, hey, I got to get in with the Russians. I'm going to kiss the ring. I got to get in with the Hells Angels. I'm going to wear the colors. I got to get, it didn't matter, and he was just an amazing crime fighting machine.
How'd you find this guy in Canada?
He was brought down, an acquaintance of mine, through a woman I know, a television and movie producer, Lisa Ullman, knew this guy, who knew the story of this guy, and I said, send him down. And we met him, and within a week, we had a proposal going out to publishers, and Random House Canada said, we have to have this book. And I went up to Ontario and literally lived with this guy and his beautiful family for the time it took to do the research. And wow, just an amazing story. Another one that got away. I think, someone should make a television show out of that. But that's what I think about all my books. I should be so lucky,
Okay, so we're going to have Mark Ebner is going to be staying with an after show. So if you want to call in, the number is 702-605-4894. That's 702-605-4894. And let's just plug all your books before we lose Revolution Radio.
Okay.
Yeah, go to my website, Opperman Report blog, and we got links up there to Hollywood Interrupted. Tell us about Hollywood Interrupted.
Hollywood Interrupted is basically a placeholder site that was born out of the book I did with Andrew Breitbart, HollywoodInterrupted.com, and I tend to have my work there. The one thing I've done that was smart in my career is every story you read on that website or anywhere else, I own it 100%, the copyright. I do not sign sucker contracts, which is pretty much the norm for journalism these days.
Yeah, it sounds like you're doing, yeah.
The magazines want all the rights, and no way. I'm creating something for you. That's my intellectual property. You get to make money selling your magazines for 90 days. The copyright reverts back to me. You don't like it? I'm going to go write a book because I don't have time for this, dying, dead tree, dying journalism. It's just not working anymore. It's very tough to make a living. So the only thing I do is I've taken my skill at long-form journalism and turned it into ultra-long-form journalism. And I guess, there are people out there who enjoy a good true crime read. God bless them. I love you.
It's definitely
keep buying my books.
Now, what about self-publishing? Do you ever do any self-published work?
No, I'm, that's as much as I'd like to explore that, I call myself OG. I'm stuck in the old school in many ways. I got one foot in the future and the other foot in the fact that, the only people that can give advance money are the traditional publishers. And I need that money to spend up for a year on a book. It's simple math, the advances aren't as big as they once were. And, you got to really, last year I had to do 2 books, not one, just to make my nut. And what you got as a result, thank you very much, is being Uncle Charlie and Poison Candy. So you know what? Yeah, I had to step it up. 54 years old, you're starting to think about, I'm talking about right until I drop. I think you know what I'm saying, Ed.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying.
All right.
I think we got a lot in common,
Yeah, right?
I hate to admit it, but, it's...
Hey! If you enjoy what you do, this is the life itself. No regrets.
Well, I'm enjoying the radio show, that's for sure.
Good,
yeah,
good.
I'm enjoying this. But Hollywood Interrupted, that was a book as well. It's not just a website.
No, it was a book.
And you wrote that with Breitbart.
Yeah. New York Times bestseller. Basically that was, Andrew and I were fooling around on AOL Instant Messenger. He was working for Matt Drudge. He was his right-hand man working the swing shift at the Drudge Report. I'm the left-wing VW bus driving, Venice Beach dwelling, liberal who got together on the same page with Andrew Breitbart with our mutual loathing for celebrity. And we decided to do an intervention. So we wrote this book under the premise that celebrity is a disease, and we're going to correct all that. And the book came out, caused a lot of controversy, pissed off a lot of people, and it made my dad proud, R.I.P. Dr. Herbert Ebner, but I hit the New York Times bestseller list. Nobody can ever take that away from me.
Yeah, it's a hell of an accomplishment.
Hey, yeah. Listen, I have yet to see a royalty check to testify to the same, but you know what? I'm done complaining. Like I said, no regrets. You do what you love.
Okay, because to make the bestsellers list, New York Times bestseller, you have to sell like 10,000 books in a week, right?
At the time, you could do it on a slow news week. You could do it without much competition, without an Obama, a Hillary, or a Bill Clinton book coming out at the same time. You can hit that list by moving 5,000 in a week.
That's still a ton of books, man.
Hey, yeah, listen, I'm social media guy. I'm all over Facebook, Twitter, all that stuff. It's a numbers game. I have 5,000 friends on Facebook. You just, became part of that because some people got offended by something I was talking about Israel.
I know.
Whatever. So I opened the door up. I let somebody else in. 5,000 friends. If 100 of them buy a hardcover book of mine, I think, it was worth stirring up the pot on social media. I don't know how that translates, but you know what? It keeps me in business. What can I say?
Yeah, I hear you. But see, if you're self-publisher, you keep the whole $20.
That's what they say, but that's the thing. It's like I'm not James Ellroy. I'm not the people I look up to.
Yeah.
As much as I'm on television, you'd think that I'd have a brand. I don't know, man. It's sort of like, it's like Joel Godler, my consigliere, my manager over at Intellectual Property Group, who incidentally represents James Ellroy and put together the book and movie Wolf of Wall Street. He always tells me I'm not his top earner, but he goes, Mark, something will come along. It always does, And then when I tell him, I said, come on, get me the big ticket thing right now. And he goes, Ebner, you got to work on your brand. What else can I do? What else can I do to work on this brand? I suit up and show up like a two-bit whore for every opportunity.
Yeah.
No offense, Ed, but you know what I'm saying? It's sort of like, hey, I'm out there as much as anybody else. Buy my books or not, and if you don't, you're missing out on some good storytelling.
No, yeah, definitely. I would definitely agree with that. And after that, when we get into the after show, I want to get into the whole poison candy story, the Dahlia DePolito story, man, which is fascinating, man. I definitely want to get into that.
Yeah, do I get to say Baba Booey on the after show?
Yeah, well, no, we still can't curse on the after show.
No, I was going to say Baba Booey and Howard Stern has a small penis. That's all. All right, I'm just messing with you.
No, you could definitely do that, man. Yeah.
So what do we got, a few minutes before we jump into that?
Yeah, a couple more minutes, about 2 more minutes. Anything you want to say while we have the big audience or
thanks for listening. Listen, I hope that we've enlightened you, and like I said, it's always it's always great to get together and yak it up with a fellow investigative mind. That's it.
Amen. And you could find links to most of his books. I got 4 of them up there now.
That's cool.
On Opperman Report blog.